I gripped my phone tighter, my pulse quickening as I stepped away from my desk, searching for a quiet corner. "What do you mean you canceled the reservation?" My voice was sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "The engagement party is this Saturday. We sent out invitations weeks ago." On the other end of the line, my mother, Charlotte, responded with the carefully measured tone she always used when delivering unpleasant news. "Your father and I talked it over, and we simply can't justify spending that kind of money on a party. We'll arrange something more appropriate." Appropriate. The word made my stomach twist. "The Oak Ridge estate was my dream venue," I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "I've been talking about celebrating milestones there since I was 16. "Dreams have to align with reality, dear," my mother said smoothly, as if she were imparting wisdom instead of snatching something away from me. "I've been looking into some lovely restaurant back rooms that would be much more suitable." I cut in before she could continue. "We already put down a deposit. How much could you possibly be saving by canceling now?" There was a pause, just long enough to tell me this wasn't about money. "It's not just about finances, Charlotte. It's about being realistic about your future. Given Alex's background, perhaps it's best to start with something simple." The veiled insult hit like a slap, the meaning unmistakable. My parents weren't canceling the party because of money. They were canceling it because they were ashamed. I ended the call, muttering something about discussing it later, but I already knew the decision had been made. I'm Charlotte Bennett, 29 years old. I grew up in Cincinnati's prestigious Amberley Village, surrounded by wealth and expectations. But I spent my entire life proving that I could stand on my own. I built a successful career in architectural design without my father's influence. I bought my own apartment without touching my trust fund. And I fell in love with Alex Zhang, a brilliant software developer who had grown up with little but built something remarkable through his own talent and determination. My parents, however, never looked past his simple wardrobe and quiet confidence. They saw him as a reminder of a world beneath theirs, a world that didn't belong in the carefully curated image of the Bennett family. I returned to my desk, still seething, when my phone vibrated with a text from my sister, Stephanie. "Mom just told me about Riverside. Ugh, so sorry, but silver lining. She's upgrading my birthday venue to offset the family embarrassment. Isn't that great?" I read the message 3 times before it fully sank in. This wasn't about finances. This was about them, about the image they wanted to project, about who was worth celebrating. And Alex and I hadn't made the cut. The worst part? Stephanie's birthday was the following weekend, the same weekend my parents suddenly couldn't afford to celebrate my engagement. Growing up in the Bennett family, appearances were everything. My father built Cincinnati's largest commercial real estate firm on relationships forged at country clubs and charity galas. My mother sat on the boards of prestigious cultural institutions, ensuring our name was always printed in the right social columns. Stephanie flourished in that world. 2 years younger than me, she played her role perfectly, dating men with impeccable pedigrees, pursuing a law degree out of obligation rather than passion, and embodying every expectation our parents had for a perfect daughter. I, on the other hand, had always been the outlier. Instead of joining my mother's sorority in college, I spent my weekends designing community centers in underserved neighborhoods. After graduation, I turned down my father's offer of a corner office at Bennett Properties and joined a small, forward-thinking architecture firm focused on sustainable design. Each decision widened the gap between me and my family, but I had convinced myself they at least respected my independence, even if they didn't understand it. Then I met Alex. At a tech conference where I was presenting on smart building integration, He sat in the front row, asking the most thoughtful questions about architectural sustainability and emerging technology. Later, we grabbed coffee and talked for hours about our work, our ambitions, and the vastly different worlds we came from. He was sharp, kind, and refreshingly real in a way that no one in my parents' circles had ever been. After 6 months, I brought him home for dinner. The evening was excruciating. My parents had grilled him about his education, a state university, attended on a scholarship. His family, middle class. His father a high school teacher, his mother a nurse. They had smiled politely, but their disapproval was palpable. I had ignored it, convinced myself that in time they would see Alex for who he truly was. But tonight, as I stared at my sister's text, the truth settled over me like a lead weight. They had never intended to accept him. They had never intended to accept me. My father barely concealed his disapproval when Alex mentioned that he still drove his old college car, a 15-year-old Honda that, in his words, ran just fine. Later that evening, my mother had tried to mask her condescension with a forced smile, calling him resourceful, as though she were generously attempting to overlook his lack of wealth. I told myself they just needed time to see beyond his bank account, beyond their obsession with pedigree, and recognize the man I did, brilliant, kind, and infinitely generous. 6 months later, when Alex proposed with a modest yet deeply meaningful ring he had designed himself, their lukewarm congratulations were immediately followed by a push for a long engagement. "Just to be sure," my father had said, voice smooth with thinly veiled condescension. "Marriage is a lifelong decision, Charlotte. You should really take the time to know someone fully before committing." But what he meant was clearer than ever. He hoped I'd come to my senses and find someone more appropriate. In hindsight, the signs had been there all along. The canceled engagement party was never meant to happen. The final confirmation arrived 3 days later when, still simmering in quiet anger, I drove to my parents' house unannounced, avoiding their calls until I had the strength to confront them. As I pulled into the long, curved driveway, my stomach twisted at the sight of 3 familiar cars. My aunt's Mercedes, my father's business partner's Range Rover, and Stephanie's BMW. The sunroom was alive with chatter and laughter, the table covered in catering samples and floral arrangements. My mother was gesturing animatedly toward a seating chart. "The Oak Ridge estate has such beautiful natural light," she said, tracing a spot on the diagram with one manicured finger. "And the head table will be positioned perfectly to overlook the river." I stepped forward, my voice slicing through their conversation. "What's this?" 5 heads snapped in my direction, startled. My mother recovered first, her practiced social grace clicking into place. "Charlotte, we weren't expecting you. We're just finalizing the details for Stephanie's birthday at Oak Ridge." I blinked. The terrace. It wasn't a question. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room. My aunt suddenly found something fascinating on her phone. My father's business partner muttered about needing to make a call and slipped away. Stephanie, at least, had the decency to look ashamed. "I told Mom it was too soon after your situation," she mumbled, but she insisted the venue was perfect and already available. "Available," I echoed coldly. "Because you canceled my reservation." My father exhaled and stood, straightening his golf shirt as if preparing for a negotiation. "Charlotte, let's discuss this privately." "Why?" My voice remained steady, though fury burned beneath the surface. "Everyone here already knows what happened. You canceled my engagement party, claimed it was too expensive, and then booked the same venue for Stephanie's birthday. So tell me, why?" My mother's smile remained fixed in place, polished and practiced. It's not that simple, honey. With the guest list we've curated for Stephanie's celebration, the Riverside Terrace makes perfect sense. The connections your father can strengthen there. And my guests, I cut in. My celebration wasn't valuable enough? My father took over, his tone clipped. That's not what your mother is saying. Charlotte, we've been patient through this phase of yours, working at that tiny firm, living in that modest apartment, and now, Alex. His name on my father's lips was the last crack before the dam broke. Alex? I repeated, voice sharp. What does my fiancé have to do with this? My parents exchanged a look I had seen too many times before, the quiet calculation before delivering a blow they had convinced themselves was for my own good. My mother sighed, her expression softening into something that might have passed for concern if I didn't know better. Sweetheart, he's not suitable. Not for someone with your background. He's polite, yes, but he has no family connections, no real influence, and no means to offer you the life you deserve. The words hit harder than I expected. I took a step back, inhaling sharply. No means to offer me. What exactly? I asked. A house in Amberley Village? Country club memberships? A name people recognize at charity galas? My father sighed, exasperated. Charlotte, you know exactly what we mean. Your fiancé isn't good enough for this family. And deep down, you know it too. We're only trying to save you from a mistake you'll regret. There it was, the final, unvarnished truth. A lifetime of expectations, of whispered corrections, of carefully placed disapproval, all leading to this moment. I had always sensed their disapproval, but hearing it spoken so plainly struck something deep inside me. Standing there, surrounded by decorations and carefully curated guest lists, for a celebration that wasn't mine, I saw my parents with stark clarity. Their love was conditional, their values rooted in appearance over authenticity, and their conviction in their own judgment unshakable. I walked out without another word, my thoughts racing. They had dismissed Alex without ever truly knowing him, and for the first time, I wondered if they had ever really known me. That evening, I curled up on the couch beside Alex, my voice breaking as I recounted everything. Tears slipped down my face, and he listened in silence, his expression pained, but unsurprised. When I finished, he took my hands gently in his. I'm sorry they hurt you, he murmured, but I can't say I'm surprised by how they see me. I wiped my eyes. I thought they'd at least try. That family would matter more to them than status. Alex offered a sad smile. Some people only recognize worth in things they understand, and your parents measure value differently. I don't fit their equation. His quiet acceptance only strengthened my resolve. Then let's throw our own engagement party, I said suddenly. Something real. Something that's us. Alex hesitated. Are you sure? Charlotte, this is your family. I don't want to be the reason you lose them. You're not the reason, I assured him. Their actions are. Please, let's do this our way. And so, over the next 2 days, I poured my frustration into something tangible. I booked a rooftop venue at a local brewery, sent out digital invitations, and called our closest friends. It was coming together beautifully. An evening that reflected us, rather than the polished image my parents wanted to maintain. Then on Friday morning, Stephanie called. Mom invited the Davenports to my party, she said flatly. A chill ran through me. The Davenports? As in Nicholas Davenport's family? Nicholas, Stephanie's ex-boyfriend, heir to a prestigious banking family, and my parents' longtime favorite. They had been furious when Stephanie broke up with him last year for Ryan, a guy they deemed too ordinary. Now it made sense. They weren't just planning a party. They were orchestrating a reunion. Mom says it's because his father is considering investing in Dad's new project, Stephanie continued. But we both know the real reason. And get this, she told Ryan the party was canceled due to family issues. She never even sent him an invite. I squeezed my eyes shut. Of course, the same game, different player. They're doing to you what they did to me, I said quietly. Not quite, Stephanie sighed. I'm still the golden child, remember? My party isn't canceled. They're just controlling who I celebrate with. She hesitated. Charlotte, I just wanted to say, what they said about Alex was cruel. It wasn't fair. For a fleeting moment, I thought I had found an ally. Then why don't you come to our engagement party, I asked, a rebellious spark flaring to life. Bring Ryan. Let's celebrate the way we want, right under their noses. Silence stretched between us. I can't, she admitted at last. Dad's announcing my promotion to junior partner at the firm that night. I've worked for this for years. I can't risk it, not even for you. The familiar weight of disappointment settled into my chest. So you'll let them dictate your life as long as it benefits you? Some of us don't have the luxury of burning bridges, Stephanie said, her voice tinged with frustration. Not all of us can afford to walk away. After we hung up, I sat motionless at my desk, staring at the half-finished invitations on my screen. Even the idea of celebrating felt hollow now. I could throw the party, but the people who should care the most, my own family, would be across town, celebrating without me as if my choices, my life, were an inconvenience. An hour later, Alex found me sitting there, my engagement ring glinting as I turned it absently around my finger. I must have looked as lost as I felt. The next morning, the day of our engagement party, I woke to find Alex already dressed, sipping coffee on our tiny balcony. When I stepped outside, he turned to me and with absolute sincerity said, "Let's go to Stephanie's party." I nearly choked on my first sip of coffee. The idea of willingly walking into that party felt like stepping onto a battlefield unarmed. Why would we put ourselves through that? I demanded, pacing the balcony. Alex, ever steady, met my gaze. Because walking away and hosting our own party means letting them win. But showing up, standing our ground, that's real defiance. We show them they don't control us. I exhaled sharply. They'll be awful to you, Alex. They'll barely acknowledge you, make snide comments, pretend you're not there. He shrugged, his expression unreadable. They already think I'm not good enough. What's the worst that can happen? By the time we arrived at the Oak Ridge estate, my hands were ice cold despite the summer air. The venue was breathtaking. Floor-to-ceiling windows bathed in golden light, chandeliers shimmering above tables adorned with extravagant floral arrangements, the Ohio River stretching out beyond the terrace. It was everything I'd once imagined for my own engagement party. The moment my mother spotted us, her perfectly composed smile flickered before she recovered, gliding toward us like a queen addressing uninvited guests. "Charlotte, what a surprise! And Alex," her voice dipped, all warmth gone. "Darling, this is a private family event. We didn't send you an invitation." I met her gaze evenly, my voice firm. "I know. You made it clear where I stand. But Stephanie is still my sister, and I came to support her." Her smile tightened. "Of course. That's quite mature of you. Just don't make this evening about you." Alex squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I nodded, though my pulse was erratic. "I will be." The evening crawled by in excruciating slowness. My father barely acknowledged us, his attention fixed on Nicholas Davenport, who had been strategically seated beside Stephanie. Alex was ignored in conversations, served last at dinner, and mistaken for waitstaff more than once by my parents' acquaintances. Then came my father's toast. Standing at the head table, champagne in hand, he beamed at Stephanie. Tonight we celebrate not just another year of life, but a remarkable young woman who embodies the very best of the Bennett family legacy. Stephanie has demonstrated her commitment to tradition, to professional excellence, and to forging the right relationships for a successful future. His gaze slid toward Nicholas Davenport, the implication unmistakable. In fact, I'm thrilled to announce that Stephanie has been promoted to junior partner at Bennett Properties. She'll play a pivotal role in our exciting new partnership with Davenport Financial Group. Applause erupted around the room, but I sat frozen. This wasn't just a birthday party. It wasn't even a career milestone. It was a power move, a corporate merger disguised as a family celebration, a carefully orchestrated maneuver to lock Stephanie into their control, just as they had tried with me. A chill settled over me as the realization clicked into place. This was never about Alex. It was never about his so-called lack of ambition. It was about power, about maintaining the Bennett dynasty on their terms. Alex stiffened beside me, his grip tightening. "Alex," I whispered, following his gaze. My father was deep in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. He was older, sharply dressed, and watching us with a mix of curiosity and, was that surprise? Recognition. "Who is that?" I murmured. Alex's jaw tightened. "James Whitmore." The name sent a jolt through me. As in, the CEO of Vertex Systems? One of the most powerful tech firms in the country? Before I could ask why he was here, why he was staring at Alex, my fiancé was already rising from his seat. "We need to leave. Now." As we slipped toward the exit, I caught one last glimpse of my father's face, stricken as James Whitmore gripped his arm, pointing in our direction. The desperation in his expression was unmistakable. Something was happening, and whatever it was, my father was afraid. Something had shifted, a current of change crackling beneath the surface, but I couldn't quite grasp it yet. "Will you tell me what that was about?" I asked as Alex drove, his grip tight on the wheel, his expression shadowed in the dim glow of the dashboard. He exhaled slowly, releasing some of the tension in his shoulders. "Remember the project I've been working on for the past 3 years? The one I couldn't talk much about?" I frowned. "The predictive analysis algorithm for healthcare, the one you dodge questions about whenever I bring it up." Alex's lips curled into a wry smile. "That's the one. It's done, Charlotte. Fully developed, tested, and for the last month I've been in acquisition talks." I blinked, his words landing like a delayed impact bomb. "That's incredible. But what does that have to do with tonight?" Alex's fingers drummed against the steering wheel. "Because James Whitmore's company is buying my software, the deal closes Monday morning." The weight of the revelation pressed into me. "That's a big deal, isn't it?" Alex let out a humorless laugh. "Vertex Systems doesn't do small deals, Charlotte." Before I could ask anything else, my phone buzzed, relentlessly. 3 missed calls from my father, 2 from my mother, and a text from Stephanie. "Stephanie, what the hell was your fiancé doing? Dad and Whitmore are losing their minds." I turned the screen toward Alex. "Want to fill me in on the rest?" When we got home, Alex pulled out his laptop and opened a confidential press release scheduled for Monday morning. My breath caught as I read the headline. "Pinnacle Tech acquires Future Path AI for $175 million. My eyes snapped up from the screen. $175 million? Alex nodded, watching me carefully. "It's life-changing. That's why I've been so distracted. The negotiations, legal reviews, preparations." He squeezed my hand. "I wanted to tell you, but the NDAs were airtight until the deal was finalized." My mind spun. the pieces snapping together. So Whitmore recognized you tonight? That's why he was talking to my father? Alex ran a hand through his hair. Looks like it. My guess? He assumed your father already knew who I was. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. My father. I answered, setting it on speaker. Charlotte. He greeted me, his voice suddenly cautious, deferential. Is Alex with you? I'd love to have a conversation with him about an exciting opportunity. I raised an eyebrow. It's almost midnight, Dad. What kind of opportunity could be that urgent? A pause. James Whitmore mentioned that Alex's company has developed some extraordinary healthcare technology. Bennett Properties is expanding into medical office spaces, and we'd love to discuss potential collaboration. The sheer audacity took my breath away. Hours ago, my father had barely acknowledged Alex's presence. Now, sensing an opportunity, he was eager to sit down and talk business. A slow smile spread across my lips. Actually, we'd love to discuss that further. How about brunch tomorrow? Say 11 a.m. at the Oak Ridge Estate. There was a beat of silence, probably my father recalibrating his entire approach, before he responded, That sounds perfect. I'll make the arrangements immediately. When I hung up, Alex studied me, his brow furrowed. The Oak Ridge Estate? Are you sure? I met his gaze, steel threading into my voice. If they want to talk business with you, they can do it at the place where our engagement party should have been, and they'll face you for who you are, not who they thought you were. Alex chuckled but shook his head. Charlotte, I never wanted my work or money to define how people saw me. That's why I drive an old car, why I don't dress to impress. I wanted to be valued for who I am, not my bank account. I reached for his hand, squeezing gently. And I love you for that. But tomorrow isn't about money. It's about making a point, about showing them the consequences of underestimating people based on appearances, and about reclaiming our dignity on our terms. As we got ready for bed, my phone vibrated one last time. Dad, brunch is confirmed. Oak Ridge Estate, private room. Looking forward to discussing this opportunity with Alex. I set the phone down, my resolve sharpening. Tomorrow my parents would finally see the truth. The Oak Ridge Estate looked different in daylight, less grand, more exposed. Sunlight streamed through the towering windows, casting long beams across the polished floors. No shadows to hide in today. Brunch was set with perfection. Polished silverware, fresh-cut lilies, and the kind of meticulous attention to detail my mother reserved for events that mattered. My parents arrived first, dressed to impress, their expressions carefully curated to exude warmth and welcome. Stephanie was next, her curiosity evidently outweighing any lingering embarrassment from our last conversation. To my quiet satisfaction, she had brought Ryan along, a small act of defiance against our parents' carefully constructed social script. Alex and I arrived last. He wore the same understated button-down and jeans he had on the day we met, an intentional choice we discussed that morning. I opted for a professional yet unassuming outfit, signaling architect Charlotte, not Bennett heiress Charlotte. Alex, it's wonderful to see you again, my father said, extending his hand with an enthusiasm that hadn't existed a week ago. James Whitmore speaks very highly of your work, very highly indeed. Alex accepted the handshake with his usual composure, respectful but unimpressed by the sudden shift in tone. We took our seats, coffee and mimosas arriving with clockwork efficiency. My father launched into a rehearsed monologue about synergies and exciting opportunities, while my mother nodded along, going so far as to place a delicate hand on Alex's arm to emphasize a point, the same Alex she had barely acknowledged before tonight. When he finally paused, I reached into my bag, pulling out a folder. With Alex's consent, I placed it on the table and slid it toward them. "Before we go any further," I said, my voice level, "I think we should all be clear on exactly what we're discussing." I flipped the folder open, revealing the acquisition documents Alex had shown me the night before. Alex isn't just a developer in the healthcare space. He's the founder of Future Path AI, the company that Pinnacle Tech is acquiring tomorrow for $175 million. The room stilled. My father stared at the papers, his fingers tightening around the edge of the table. My mother's smile froze, her eyes darting between Alex and the neatly printed figures before her. "I believe Bennett Properties reached out to Pinnacle last year about a partnership for your medical development project," I continued smoothly. "And they declined. Isn't that right, Dad?" The silence was deafening. My father cleared his throat, his carefully cultivated composure slipping for the first time in his professional life. "I wasn't aware of the full extent of Alex's involvement," he admitted, his voice measured. "This is impressive." My mother recovered more quickly. "Alex, you should have told us. All this time we thought—" She trailed off, realizing there was no graceful way to finish that sentence. "Thought what?" I asked, tilting my head. "That he wasn't good enough because he drives an old Honda? Because he doesn't flaunt wealth or pedigree?" Stephanie, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly sat up straighter. "Wait, Future Path AI?" She turned to Alex. "Ryan applied for a job there last year. That company is insanely selective." Ryan shifted in his seat. "Didn't make it past the second interview," he admitted, glancing at Alex. "They only take the best." "Alex hires people based on talent and character," I said evenly, my gaze sweeping across the table, not family name or social connections. Imagine that. The weight of my words settled over them. In one moment, everything they had dismissed, Alex, our engagement, the celebration they had sabotaged, was laid bare for what it truly was, their own shallow miscalculations. My father exhaled slowly. "It seems we may have misjudged the situation," he said carefully. "Perhaps we should start fresh. We'd be happy to host a proper engagement party for you. The riverside, of course. No expense spared." I turned to Alex. He met my gaze, a subtle nod passing between us. "That won't be necessary," I said, rising from my seat. "We'll be celebrating next Saturday on the rooftop of Blue Ridge Tap Room. Simple, genuine, surrounded by the people who have always supported us." I let the words settle before continuing, my voice calm but unwavering. "I didn't come here to mend fences or convince you to see things differently. I came so you could understand what your judgment cost you. Not just a son-in-law you dismissed before truly knowing, but a daughter who wanted you to look past your narrow definition of success and value something deeper." I reached for Alex's hand. Without another word, we walked out of the Oak Ridge estate for the second and final time. Behind us, my parents remained seated, their carefully curated world cracking under the weight of their own arrogance.